What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be a little bit different than what we're used to because on Tuesday, January 16th, US Legend Cars put out a news release saying that they are going to allow the use of rear disc brakes starting March 1st for all competition. Now, those of you that are already a part of the Legend Cars, you would know that our current brake setup right now is drum brakes, which consists of two brake shoes on either side, a wheel cylinder on top, the adjuster right there below it, and a couple of springs that help pull the brake shoes away from the actual drum on the inside. This is a pretty typical setup of what drum brakes would look like, and obviously our axle shoots through here, through the backing plate, straight into the axle tube. So US Legend Cars is moving from this current setup to a similar setup that we have on the fronts. Disc brakes on the rear of Legend Cars was always a possibility, considering that this car has a lot of similarities to the Thunder Roadster that is also produced by Inex and US Legend Cars. Both cars share the same rear ends and axles and everything, and right now the Thunder Roadster does actually use rear disc brakes, so it was only a matter of time before they brought that platform over to the Legend Cars, because I'm assuming that there's a lot of parts sitting on shelves specifically for Thunder Roadster right now, because there's not a ton of people I know driving them. I could be wrong, but I know that there's not really any out here, especially driving under the Inex banner. So I feel it was only a matter of time before they brought those disc brake components over to the Legend Cars. Now, the news of the disc brake conversion comes just shy of a year after the AFCO announcement, and I know that there wasn't a ton of people super happy, not only with the change in shocks, but the different valvings, the price, the movement away from a totally spec series to now introducing a bunch of different parts for pretty much a mini late model at this point. And that's no different with how people feel of the introduction of the disc brakes to these. So now many people aren't super happy with the introduction of the rear disc brakes on these cars, but there's still a lot of information missing out there right now, and I know that as we get closer to the date that those are approved, we'll start to get more and more information, and possibly some information on a couple of nuanced things for the disc brakes. But for now, here's what we do know. So we made our way to our computer over here to take a look at the post where we found our information. As you can see, this is actually a Facebook post coming from US Legend Cars International and Inex. It states that US LCI introduces rear disc brakes to Legend Cars, available for purchase effective immediately and legal for competition starting on March 1st. Obviously, there's quite a few reactions to this post, and they link below in a comment to the rulebook update for it. As you can see, there's quite a few people that are expressing their opinions right now, and there's also an individual who asked down below, since they noticed in the picture that the rear brakes are drilled and slotted, and they were wondering if we could do that on the front as well. But unfortunately, according to US Legend Cars and Inex, fronts have to be as delivered by US LCI, and it doesn't sound like they're going to be updating the way that they deliver them. So unfortunately, it does sound like we're going to be stuck with the blank rotors on the front. Now, moving over to the actual news article on the website, we can see immediately this is where they detail exactly how much it's going to cost when it goes into effect. As you can see, the rear disc brakes will be legal for Inex competition beginning March 1st, 2024, the same day the 2024 rulebook goes into effect. Rear disc brakes are available for purchase effective immediately. They will be sold in kits that include calipers, brackets, rotors, axle spacers, brake lines, and fittings, all for $619.99. Brake pads are not included in the kit. To place an order for your rear disc brakes, please contact your local dealer. US LCI will continue to offer drum brake components for drivers not prepared to make the conversion at this time. So right off the bat, we learned that there's a conversion kit available right now for $620, not including tax in your local state, but also we learned that the brake pads are not actually coming with the kit. So not only do you have to fork over the $620, but you also have to fork over however much the pads you want to use are. And now we have to take the time to test out different pad compounds in the back as well as the front, since now it's going to change brake dynamic all around, and spend more and more money trying to dial that in just to get the right pads you want. So this definitely isn't going to be a cheap implementation for a lot of people, but I'm sure that there's some people who are more than willing to make the conversion, because realistically 4 disc brakes are going to be better than 2 disc and 2 drums, just because of the stopping power, the cooling ability, and just the fact that you'll get more overall usage from brake pads than you would with brake shoes. Now, jumping on over to the rulebook update PDF here, we actually see that they include an image of what the brake conversion kit's going to look like. You can see we've got 2 rotors here on the left. They are drilled and slotted. We've got 2 calipers in the middle, To me, they look like they're the same calipers as we run on the fronts, but some people are saying that they aren't, and some people are saying that they're a little bit smaller, but they're also saying that they're the same pads. So until that information fully comes out, I'm not going to say whether or not they are the exact same, so we'll leave it as it is right now. You can see you also get 2 braided brake lines right now. I'm assuming that connect to the T-fitting on your rear end, and inside there's also a little baggie that comes with all the fittings you'll probably need to connect your brake lines to your calipers. And then finally on the right over here, you'll have these 2 brake caliper brackets, as well as the 2 axle spacers to effectively take place of the backing plate of the drums. So here we have an image from the old 600 Racing online catalog, where we got our brake drum right here, which goes on top of the axle. The axle goes through the backing plate here, connects to the rear end housing. The brake shoes sit on top of the backing plate, and the axle bolts are actually right in between the backing plate and the brake shoes. So it is a little difficult to get that axle on and off sometimes, but it's really not all that big of a deal. So right now what I'm assuming is that those axle spacers are going to take place of what the backing plate does in terms of spacing how the axle fits against the axle housing, because right now the bolts for the axle actually go completely through the rear end housing and the backing plate. So assuming that the spacers are actually the same thickness as the backing plate, I don't think it's going to change how wide the track width is for the car, but it does ultimately affect our rear offset wheel. Initially, with brake drums, we have 6 inches to use from the outer edge of the frame rail to the backing plate, and with the new drum package, that actually changes to 6.5 inches on either side minimum. I'm assuming that's going to be, again, from the outer frame rail to the brake disc, but there's no confirmation on that in this rulebook update as of now. Now, one thing I really do appreciate about this conversion kit is that it's fully bolt-on, and it actually uses a lot of the same components that are already out there. You won't have to swap your rear end housing, your gears, or your axles. The only thing that changes out of that whole bunch is going to be your brakes. Now, one of the most significant changes to the rulebook, if you choose to run the rear disc brake package, is that those that choose to run it are actually allowed to throw in an additional brake valve into their system so that you can control your front and rear bias. Now this is actually huge, because with the drum brakes right now, you can actually adjust your left and right shoes with that little adjusting spin pin, so that you can actually either have your left rear brakes grab just slightly before your right rear, or control your front and rear bias like that, so that you're not forced to put your brake bias controller on the line that goes to your rear. For instance, our personal car right now, our brake bias valve is actually to our right front, so that when we go to a short track, we can actually start shutting off that right front. It'll help the left front brake pad grab the brakes a little bit sooner than the right front and help the car turn a little bit better. So that's obviously huge for us, just having a second brake valve specifically for the rear. Not only could you have the one for the fronts, but now you'll have one for the rear, so you can really dial in your brake valving. Unfortunately, I'm not certain at this time on whether you can put your valve specifically to shut off the left rear or to adjust your right rear. I think as of right now, the rulebook states just to adjust rear pressure. So I think just based on the verbiage, you have to have it on the line going to that T towards the rear end, so that you adjust rear bias as a whole and not left or right. Now, unfortunately, for those of us sticking with the brake drums on the rear, we do still have to adhere to the minimum weight rule for the brake drums. So unfortunately, I think overall the drums are heavier than the new disc brakes, but until we get numbers out there, I'm not 100% sure, because I have no idea how heavy the rotors are, no idea how heavy the calipers are in the new pads. So until we get numbers on it, I have no idea if there's even a difference, but I'm pretty confident that the drums are going to be heavier overall than the disc brakes. Now, it seems that there's not a lot of people super happy with the decision that Inex is making to release rear brake discs for these cars. And a lot of those guys' justification comes from the lack of support on tires, the lack of availability for the new shocks that released just last year, because I know that there's a lot of regions right now still having a ton of trouble just getting tires stock. So I do understand their gripes with the company from that viewpoint. but I don't think that disc brakes are the worst thing that's happened to these cars in recent years. I don't think anyone's going to be too particularly upset about the people that choose to stay with the drum brake setup, but I also don't think anyone's going to be upset about the people that fork over the cash to get the disc brake conversion kit. Because truthfully, disc brakes are just a more consistent product than drum brakes are overall. Now, of course, many people have found a way to make drum brakes work for them, and that's awesome because these cars have had them since their inception. And I'm not trying to sit here and tell everyone that they need to convert, but truthfully, disc brakes are going to be a more consistent product than the drum brakes that they've had the entire time. I know that the drum brakes have been around since the inception of the Legend car, and I know tons of people have figured out how to use them and how to make them work for themselves, but that doesn't mean that we need to look past the disc brakes and completely sideline them, because they are going to be a really good product. As for us personally, I do think we're going to skip the conversion for this year because that just isn't a line item we have in our budget for this year, unfortunately. With our goal this year of trying to keep our overall costs down, we're definitely trying to spend a lot less on parts on the car this year, so definitely don't think that the conversion swap is something necessary for us to do. I'm sure it would be better, but as of right now, we just don't have the $750, $800 after buying everything to throw at it right now. But we're definitely gonna watch out for the guys that do make the conversion at our local tracks and try to see what kind of changes those disc brakes can bring to the table over the drum brakes. But as with everything else with Legend cars, nothing's gonna be simple, and I'm sure that a lot of people are gonna be upset about the direction that these cars are going. But let me know what you guys think down below. I wanna see how many of you are actually gonna go through the conversion swap, or how many of you are just gonna stick to the tried and true drum brakes. I'm definitely not looking at that from a competition perspective, but I do wanna see how many people go through the changes and kind of see how it affects their driving. So that's all I wanted to talk with you guys about today. I definitely appreciate you guys watching, and I hope to catch you in the next one.
Find a place with a view. The pain is never gonna stop if it's controlling you. I know the time can heal it.